Time for another episode of Council Bluffs Today on this Monday. Council Bluffs Today presented by Waldstein Plumbing. I'm Todd Studer. Hope you had a great weekend. Over the past couple of episodes last week, we were working our way through different eras of Council Bluffs local history. We covered the final decades of Amelia Bloomer's life and her work with the suffrage movement here in Council Bluffs. And we also broke down the geographical history of Carter Lake, tracing exactly how that 1877 Missouri River flood cut off an oxbow loop and left a piece of the Iowa Territory stranded on the west side of the river. Today, we're moving into the 20th century to look at a highly specific 4-day window when this community became the primary focal point of a massive Hollywood marketing campaign. Now, if you drive down 9th Avenue today, you pass by a 56-foot concrete railroad spike standing at the intersection of South 21st Street. It's an everyday local landmark, but it has a very distinct design feature that, have you noticed the monument? It's entirely upside down. The wide head of the spike forms the flat base on the ground, and the sharp point sticks straight up into the air. Now, if you don't know the background of the site, very easy to assume that the structure was built back in 1869 to celebrate the driving of the actual Golden Spike that finished the Transcontinental Railroad, but that is a common local assumption. But it's completely wrong. That concrete monument was actually built 70 years later in April of 1939. It was not paid for by an historical preservation society, a school district, or a standard civic planning committee. It was financed and constructed as a giant physical advertisement for a Paramount Pictures Western film called Union Pacific, which was directed by Cecil B. DeMille, starred Hollywood legends Barbara Stanwyck and Joel McCrea. Now, to launch the film, studio executives and local leaders put together a massive 4-day celebration. It was called the Golden Spike Days. And over the course of that weekend, an estimated 250,000 visitors flooded into our area and, of course, across the river in Omaha. Now, it temporarily doubled our local population and required the deployment of the National Guard to manage all the street traffic, shut down local schools, and featured a cross-country promotional steam train that carried the cast directly from California here to the Midwest. Today, we're going to break down the exact history of that event, look at how the logistics were split between Council Bluffs and Omaha, and track what eventually happened to the 3 iconic Douglas Street movie palaces that hosted the film simultaneously on premiere night. So to understand why a major movie studio chose our community for a world premiere, you have to look at the literal geography of the railroad system. In August of 1859, that lanky lawyer from Illinois named Abraham Lincoln, he came to Council Bluffs to look at real estate land parcels. And while he was in town, he had a casual but historic meeting with a young railroad engineer named Grenville Dodge. And the two men walked up to a scenic overlook on the bluffs, looked out across the wide Missouri River Valley, and Lincoln asked Dodge where the best possible route would be to construct a transcontinental rail line that could link the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Grenville Dodge pointed straight out across the valley and told him that the path tracking through the Platte Valley was the only logical engineering route. Lincoln never did forget that conversation, and a few years later, when he was president, he signed the Pacific Railway Act of 1862. When it came time to choose the official starting point for the eastward construction of the line, Lincoln issued an executive order officially designating Council Bluffs, Iowa, as the eastern terminus, making our community the true milepost zero of the Transcontinental Railroad. So now, jump ahead 80 years to 1839. The United States entering its 10th straight year of the Great Depression, and the public was exhausted. The economy was hammered, and Paramount Pictures had just poured a fortune into Cecil B. DeMille's new movie, Union Pacific. The film was a massive, high-budget epic based on the 1936 novel Troubleshooter by Ernest Haycox. This patriotic story about workers battling train crashes, sabotage, and the elements to stitch the country back together with iron rails. The studio executives knew they had a great film, but they needed a massive publicity stunt to get people into theaters. They realized that May of 1939 would mark exactly 70 years since the driving of the original Golden Spike in Utah. So, standard movie premieres always happened at all the glamorous theaters on Sunset Boulevard or in New York City. But Paramount made a calculated marketing decision, and they wanted the historical legitimacy of the place where the railroad actually began. So, because Council Bluffs held the legal designation of Mile Zero, where the entire track layout originated, the studio targeted our metro area for the launch and decided to pack up the top stars in Hollywood, put them on a physical steam train, and send them directly to the heart of the American Midwest. Now, because Council Bluffs was actively competing for national attention with the much larger city of Omaha across the river, local leaders wanted a massive permanent landmark to secure their place in the national newsreel coverage. The result was the construction of the 56-foot concrete spike on 9th Avenue. The monument was completely designed by Council Bluffs city engineer Jack Boyne, and the timeline for its execution, it was very tight, and the construction details are fully documented in the City Council archives. Boyne proposed the monument at a council meeting in March of 1939. It just left a few weeks to build it before the Hollywood entourage arrived. The engineering logistics were intense. The completed structure weighs exactly 243,200 pounds. It's all reinforced concrete. The monument was designed to be exactly 100 times larger than a standard real-world iron railroad spike. And a crew of 14 local men worked in rotating shifts, 24 hours a day, pouring the concrete. It took exactly 5 days to excavate and pour the massive base foundation, and another 5 days to pour and form the main vertical spike. Because the construction ran straight through the night, the city erected emergency floodlights around the scaffolding so the workers could paint. During the final stretch, the temporary electrical grid failed, and the entire site was plunged into darkness. To keep the project from stalling, local police officers headed over to 9th Avenue, parked their cruisers in a tight circle around the base, and used their headlights to illuminate the concrete so the painters could finish applying that gold paint before dawn. The entire project cost $3,500. Now, that's $1939. So when it was finished on April 26th in 1939, the spike was wrapped in 250 yards of white cloth that was provided by a local department store so it could be unveiled dramatically during the civic ceremony. The Union Pacific Railroad officially designated the small patch of grass around it as Milepost Zero to guarantee its historical accuracy for visiting tourists. So when the concrete was curing on 9th Avenue, the promotional machine was moving across the country. Paramount Pictures didn't just buy standard train tickets for their cast. They leased a functioning, historic 1860s-era steam train to operate as a rolling billboard. The train left Los Angeles, had director Cecil B. DeMille, also top stars Barbara Stanwyck was there. She played Molly Monahan, and also Joel McCrea. His character was Captain Jeff Butler, frontier troubleshooter. So they're joined by a large group of studio executives and publicists and journalists, and they're packed into these vintage luxury cars dressed up to look like an old pioneer caravan. The journey from Hollywood to the Missouri River took 3 days and was engineered for maximum national publicity. At every small town or water station and whistle stop across California and Nevada, Utah, and Wyoming, the train would screech to a halt, doors would fly open, Barbara Stanwyck and Joel McCrea would step out onto that wooden back platform, waving at all the fans that had lined up along the gravel tracks. By the time the steam locomotive crossed into the region, local anticipation, it's completely out of control. Newspapers were printing daily tracking maps of the train's location. Schools are preparing to cancel classes. Businesses decorating their storefronts with pioneer wagons and bunting, and the community was ready to welcome the stars. Council Bluffs was determined to secure its piece of the history. Council Bluffs Today brought to you by GLI Insurance Group. Summer in Southwest Iowa means road trips, backyard projects, storms, lake weekends, and a whole lot more time on the go. Before the season gets too busy, make sure your insurance is ready for it. GLI Insurance Group can help you review your home, auto, business, farm, and life insurance so you know what is covered before you need it. Local people, local service, and coverage built around your life. Contact GLI Insurance Group today and head into summer with a little more peace of mind. Technology should work for you, not against you. At ThinkSpace IT, they provide expert IT solutions to keep your business running smoothly and securely. From cybersecurity and cloud services to network management and tech support, they simplify IT so you can focus on what matters most. Stay protected, stay connected, stay ahead. Visit ThinkSpaceIT.com. So now that we have established why Council Bluffs held the historic keys to Milepost Zero and how our city engineers rushed to build that upside-down concrete spike on 9th Avenue, let's look at what happened when the festival actually did kick off. So on April 28, 1939, Golden Spike Days Festival opened with a massive national broadcast. It reached all the way to the White House. President Franklin Roosevelt sat in the Oval Office in Washington, D.C., surrounded by press, microphones, and cameras, and at that exact moment, the president reached down, pressed a golden telegraph key, and that electrical signal traveled instantly across thousands of miles of wire, shooting straight into our region, and the pulse triggered a relay switch that automatically threw open the doors of the Civic Auditorium, set off factory sirens and air horns and steam whistles all across the river valley. The crowd sizes that followed were completely unprecedented for our area. Over the course of the four-day festival, an estimated 250,000 visitors poured into the metro. The streets were so tightly packed with pedestrians, automobile traffic ground to a total halt. Hotels were booked solid for 50 miles in every direction. Visitors were renting out spare bedrooms from local families, sleeping in their cars, setting up temporary camps along the riverbanks just to be close to the atmosphere. The local population, we all leaned into pioneer fever. The city councils of both Council Bluffs and Omaha passed official temporary civic ordinances requiring residents to dress in period-accurate 1860s attire to match the timeline of the movie. Local men formed whisker clubs, growing out of frontier beards and wearing wool vests. Women wore traditional pioneer bonnets and calico dresses. So if you're a man walking down the street and you're clean-shaven or without a vest, there was a mock vigilante committee. Pull you over, issue a mock arrest, and throw you into a temporary wooden jail cell that was constructed in the center of town. You're kept there until you paid a small cash fine. All this money was collected and distributed to local charities to help families struggling through the tail end of the Great Depression. Paramount Pictures also distributed incredible physical souvenirs during the event. They manufactured thousands of 6-inch solid brass novelty railroad spikes stamped with the Union Pacific movie logo and the date of the premiere. These were handed out to parade participants, also civic leaders and banquet guests. If you talk to any of the local antique dealers or estate sale hunters here in Pottawatomie County today, those 1939 brass spikes are still a highly prized collector's item. So when the national film historians write about the event, they almost always default to calling it the Omaha premiere. But if you look at the actual logistics of late April 1939, the celebration was treated as one massive, unified festival ground spanning both sides of the Missouri River. The responsibilities were split cleanly based on what each city did best. Omaha was the corporate headquarters of the Union Pacific Railroad, and they possessed the infrastructure to handle the massive entertainment logistics. They built a temporary, block-long pioneer town right on the downtown streets, featured wooden dirt floor saloons and costume bartenders, and hosted a massive, formal civil banquet for over 2,000 executives and politicians and actors. And most importantly, they had a dense cluster of massive state-of-the-art movie palaces that were sitting along Douglas Street that could handle the physical crowd capacity for a major red carpet screening. But Council Bluffs, we held the ultimate asset. We had the actual history. We had Mile Zero and the land where Lincoln stood and the home of General Grenville Dodge. So because of this, Council Bluffs became the exclusive home of the permanent historical dedications. Our streets hosted massive historical pageants and parades that focused heavily on the real-world pioneer families who cleared the brush and laid the ties for the tracks. When the Hollywood stars arrived, they didn't just stay cooped up across the river. Barbara Stanwyck, Joel McCrea, Cecil B. DeMille, they were regularly crossing the bridge, taking part in events right here on the Iowa side, paying direct homage to the true starting point of the railroad. So let's look at the actual night of the movie premiere itself, because 250,000 people had descended on the metro area. A single theater could not hold the demand. Paramount Pictures did something that had never been done before in film history. They rented out 3 of the largest, most luxurious movie palaces in the region and ran the world premiere simultaneously across all 3 screens on the exact same night. Those 3 iconic venues, they're all in Omaha. It's the Orpheum, the Omaha Theater, and the Paramount Theater. If you look back at these venues today, their individual fates tell a fascinating and maybe even a bittersweet story about how American downtowns changed and the rise of television and the intense battle for historic preservation. So let's begin with the Orpheum Theater, which is the sole surviving venue from that 1939 premiere night. So the Orpheum is at 409 South 16th Street in downtown Omaha. It's still there. You've been there. I've been there. And it originally opened its doors in 1927. It was built for a staggering cost of $2 million and designed by the world-famous theater architects C.W. and George L. Rapp, who are legendary for creating these palaces for the common man. It was an architectural masterpiece and filled with French Renaissance decor, massive crystal chandeliers, soaring ceilings, hand-carved drapery, and a massive Wurlitzer pipe organ. On the night of the Union Pacific premiere, the Orpheum was surrounded by searchlights cutting through the night sky. Visiting Hollywood actors walked up its grand entrance, greeted thousands of screaming fans that were packed behind those velvet ropes. So while many historic theaters across the country were demolished when the suburbs boomed in the 60s and 70s, the Orpheum managed to dodge the wrecking ball thanks to massive, dedicated community preservation efforts led by Omaha Performing Arts and local philanthropic foundations. The venue has undergone magnificent restorations, and today it remains active. It's kind of a crown jewel of the entire region's art scene, and it hosts traveling Broadway shows, concerts, and major cultural events. So if you walk into the Orpheum lobby today, you're stepping directly into the exact same space where Barbara Stanwyck stood in her gown on that April night in 1939. But what about the theater that bore the very name of the city? The story, well, this part is a little bit tragic because the Omaha Theater, it's not there. It was completely demolished in 1980. The venue originally opened its doors in 1921 under the name The World Theater, and it was designed specifically to host both high-end traveling vaudeville acts and also this emerging phenomenon of silent motion pictures. It was located at 1506 Douglas Street, right in the heart of what locals called Theater Row. It was this huge, jaw-dropping, ornate building, and in 1935 it was bought, remodeled, and officially renamed the Omaha Theater. So on the night of the 1939 premiere, the Omaha Theater was completely sold out, and its marquee stretched out over Douglas Street, blasted the words Union Pacific in giant neon letters. But unfortunately, as the decades rolled on, the business model for these massive single-screen movie palaces completely disintegrated. And by the late 1970s, television, home color sets, and suburban multiplexes had drained the downtown crowds. The Omaha Theater closed its doors for good as a cinema in 1978. There was a small, passionate group of local artists and historical advocates that fought to try to save the building. And, they pointed to that architecture and its irreplaceable interior craftsmanship. But the local government and urban renewal planners of the era refused to budge. And in 1980, the wrecking ball swung, and it reduced the Omaha Theater to a pile of rubble. So today, if you visit that exact spot on Douglas Street, you don't find hand-carved molding or theatrical magic. You find a standard concrete parking garage. And it stands as a reminder of how easily historic heritage can be permanently erased. S&B Country Kennel is the top spot in Southwest Iowa when you need to know your dog will receive only the best. Boarding, daycare, grooming, self-washing, training, and even a membership available to a dog park over an acre in size. S&B Country Kennel also has rescue dogs, so check with them about adoption possibilities. sbcountrykennel.com, that's country spelled with a K, located just west of I-29 on Bungie Avenue, south of Council Bluffs. Are you looking for something to do close to home? Go Local Iowa brings Southwest Iowa events together in one place, from live music and fundraisers to festivals, family activities, and community celebrations. It's also a place to discover local businesses and support the people who keep our communities moving. Before you make your weekend plans, check golocaliowa.org. Go Local Iowa. Find what's happening right here at home. Now, let's move on to the third venue, which had perhaps one of the most strangest and most fascinating history of them all, the Paramount Theater. It's still there, but you wouldn't recognize it by its original name. It's now known as the Rose Theater. The building is located at 20th and Farnham. Originally opened in 1927 under the name the Riviera Theater. It was built by a regional theater magnate named A.H. Blank. And the architecture, incredibly wild, extravagant, both Moorish and classical styles, and the interior designed to look like a lavish, open-air Italian palace courtyard, complete with a ceiling painted deep blue to mimic the night sky. And they even put twinkling electric lights and a machine that blew fake drifting clouds across the ceiling while the movie played. But 2 years after it opened, the stock market crashed in 1929, and plunged the country into the Depression. Blank was forced to sell the venue. It was bought by the Paramount Pictures studio chain, and they renamed it the Paramount Theater. Because it was owned directly by the studio, the Paramount Theater was the true flagship venue for that 1939 premiere. It was where Cecil B. DeMille and the executives spent the bulk of their evening. But what happened after 1939, this is just entertainment history. The theater struggled to stay profitable during the mid-20th century. Owners tried every gimmick in the book to bring customers in. There was an indoor golf course. This was just a wild attempt to bring in foot traffic. Owners cleared out the lower lobby and installed a functioning miniature golf course right inside the theater entrance. When that failed, it got even a little bit stranger. This was the bowling alley era. And in 1960, Creighton University purchased the land and the building. And initially, they wanted to use it as a performing arts space, but decided the layout really didn't work for their needs. So in 1961, they leased the historic movie palace to a professional bowling team called the Omaha Packers. They literally ripped out rows of priceless main floor seating and installed 4 active bowling lanes right inside the auditorium. The bowling league went completely bankrupt within a year. In 1962, the building was leased to the Dubinsky Brothers theater chain, and they remodeled the space, boarded over or hid all of that original decor, renamed it the Astro Theater in honor of astronaut John Glenn's historic spaceflight. The Astro operated as a standard movie house till it finally shut down in 1979. And it looked like the building was destined for demolition until a local hero stepped in. In 1981, a wealthy local philanthropist, her name Rose Blumkin, the legendary founder of the Nebraska Furniture Mart, she bought that decaying building to save it from destruction and donated it to the Omaha Theater Company for young people. There was a massive multi-million-dollar restoration project, and it uncovered and cleaned and repaired the hidden 1920s plasterwork and twinkling stars. So today, the venue is known as the Rose Blumkin Performing Arts Center, or simply the Rose Theater, and it serves as one of the largest and most successful children's theater companies in the entire United States. So when you look back at that incredible week in April of 1939, it's easy to get caught up in the glitz across the river because Omaha had all the red carpets at the Orpheum and the star-studded screenings at the Paramount. And they had those temporary wooden pioneer towns and the big corporate banquets. But if you look at what remains of that event today, nearly 9 decades later, you realize that Council Bluffs actually won the long game. Omaha's pioneer town was made of cheap plywood and canvas, and it was torn down and thrown into the trash the second the movie stars left town. The Omaha Theater, completely flattened, turned into asphalt and parking stalls, and the Paramount was gutted, turned into a bowling alley, and heavily altered before its eventual rescue. But Council Bluffs walked away from that Hollywood premiere with something permanent. We walked away with the Golden Spike Monument on 9th Avenue. So Paramount Pictures and the Union Pacific Railroad poured serious money into constructing that concrete monument so it could be unveiled during the premiere festivities. They wanted a physical, towering visual anchor that the Hollywood stars could stand in front of for promotional photos, and that would be printed in magazines worldwide. And that monument still stands out there today, completely unchanged, with its unique upside-down design pointing straight up to the sky. It has survived blizzards and floods and tornadoes and generations of changing city infrastructure. It remains a very unique and iconic landmark here in our community. So think about the irony of that. A 56-foot monument built by a Hollywood movie studio to promote a Western romance film has spent nearly 9 decades serving as our city's symbol of real-world historical pride. It proves that while Hollywood is great at manufacturing temporary illusions, Council Bluffs knows how to take those illusions and ground them into something lasting and permanent and real. So, there you go. Thank you so much for joining me as we have taken a look back at our own cinematic heritage. This is Council Bluffs Today, presented by Waldstein Plumbing. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you would, please. Leave a comment. If your grandparents or great-grandparents are part of the 1939 Golden Spike Days, that would be fun. And keep your eyes on the road and your heart in Council Bluffs. That's going to wrap up today's show. My name is Todd Studer, and we'll see you again tomorrow.